Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very, very accomplished professional from Singapore, Wendy Wong. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to meet you. And thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you. Wendy is the head and co-founder of 55 Minutes Private Limited. She's a human-centered designer and mentor. She's a member of the Uncommon community, and she's a mentor on the ADP list. So, Wendy, before we start talking about 55 minutes, tell me a little bit about your own journey.
Right. I think for me, I was always a designer at heart.
Mm-hmm.
I love making things beautiful and I love beautiful things, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, but I never really started out thinking that I'm going to be a boss, I'm going to be founding my own company. That was never on my mind. I like to do things and produce things and just be in the background and let others shine.
Hmm.
But I think what I've learned so far about myself is that yet there is a part of me that believes that I can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
I can make this thing better. I can make this place better. I can help someone be better.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come to realize that in order for me to fulfill that, I need to be in the forefront. I need to have a voice and I need to come out of that shell. And that's where I am at today. I founded my own design company with another co-founder and I'm leading teams and you know really finding myself even here in front of you
Mm-hmm.
doing this podcast, which is something that I probably would have never thought of doing some years back. So really just keeping an open mind and going with where I need to go in order to fulfill my vision. I think that's something that
Oh,
I'm
wonderful.
learning.
Oh, wonderful. So let's talk about 55 Minutes Private Limited. Tell me about what you're doing here and what is behind this unique name.
Yes. Um, so I think to go into that name story, the story behind our name, I have to first talk a little bit about why I even started this company.
Mm-hmm.
So I like I said, I love to make things beautiful, right? And so as a designer, um, a large part of my work was always based on answering clients' briefs,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the client would come to me and they would expect me to deliver exactly what they tell me to do.
Mm-hmm.
Or design was always based on the designer's taste or what was trending.
Mm-hmm.
So a large part of the work was based on just making sure that things are pretty and the brief is being met, and that was it. And there was nothing wrong with that, honestly. But for a long time, I felt that something was missing in this whole process.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I then chanced upon the concept of human-centered design. All right, I was very intrigued. I read up more about it. I signed up for courses and workshops to understand what is human-centered design and what
Mm-hmm.
it seeks to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more I understand it, I felt something finally click.
Mm-hmm.
Which so I was talking about something was always missing, right? And what was missing was what was the users themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the discussion table, we would have product owners, designers, developers, marketing and sales people all present. Everyone is there at the table except the users themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So my co-founder and I decided to bring the users back
Mm-hmm.
into the center of the discussion. And we want them represented at the discussion table. We don't want to spend time just creating yet another product that no one wants or no one finds useful.
Mm-hmm.
And so this whole essence of human-centered design revolves around us as designers asking questions and asking the right questions. So the name came about because Albert Einstein was quoted saying that, if he was given an hour to solve a problem, he'll take the first 55 minutes asking the right questions, and then he'll take the 5 minutes to solve the problem. And that is such a good representation of the work that I want to do. Asking the right questions. And that's why we're called 55 minutes.
Oh, wonderful. What a great response to how you got your name. Thank you. So, Wendy, my next question is, why is UX, or user experience, becoming so important in designing?
So you see, when I was sharing just now about how it used to work just by meeting a client's brief, right? Or just based on what's trending. Now, user experience, however, focuses on the users, right? So it kind of brings you back to what was the problem that you're even trying to solve in the first place. Why do you even have to design this product or this tool or this platform? Why does this matter, right? Surely it was because there was a problem to begin with, and you needed the design to solve the problem. And at the same time, the whole human-centered framework, and just really focusing on the users itself, doesn't just look at users alone. It does, however, guide you to say, this is where you should start. Start by looking into the users' needs and understanding their goals and pain points. But it also demands us as designers, right, to look at whether or not the solution that we're going to put out is viable as a business. And whether it's also something that's feasible to build and maintain when it comes to technology, right? So the users is just one part, and it's a good place to start. But you also need to look at the business viability and the feasibility in terms of the technology. So user experience design is important not just because it makes users' lives better. It also helps businesses to reach their goals and help businesses to become more strategic in what they decide to put into the world. Right. So the 5 main things that I find is a good way to kind of help everybody remember, why does user experience matter at the end of the day, is that number one, you want to spend time on problem solving and not on designing stuff that no one else needs or already exists, right? Number two, if you understand who you're designing for, and if you really know the crux of the problem, then you can create the solution with confidence, right? Correct. It's not something that you're doing out of chaos.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think with all that, right, the business gets the benefit because you now know that you're putting out something that will help you to increase the adoption rate. It's reducing waste in terms of your time and your investment of your money. And if it's something that users like to use and find useful, you're going to gain their sense of loyalty.
Correct.
And that's where the revenue is.
Yep. Well said. So my next question to you is that, every time you sit down with any user to understand their needs, there are always constraints as well from every user. It could be where the design will fit in, it could be budget, it could be anything else. How do you balance the needs and constraints of the user and the business when designing your products?
Oh, yeah, that always happens. Such a good question. So I find what has been helpful for us is having very open-minded and humble conversations with the business owner, because it is inevitable that when a business owner engages us and comes to us and say, look, I have this challenge and I need you to help us with it, it's inevitable that they already have some goals in mind, right? And some outcomes that they can envision. So we cannot expect and demand them to immediately understand the processes that we have and embrace all the outcomes that we put up to them. I think we need to understand that as designers, we have to practice a bit of patience and also speak in the language that business owners understand. Because we designers tend to have our design speak as well, right? And it's very natural, all the jargons and the words that we use. Yeah, but it can make the business owner feel unsafe, right? When they do not understand something, they don't feel safe and they're not assured that their interests are being looked after. So when we speak in the language that they understand, they are also more open and willing to listen to what we have to say. So here we are as designers. What we're saying is we are representing your customers, and we're telling you their stories and their pain points and their challenges. And we're saying, look, listen and pay attention to them because this is a major roadblock. And then we also need to extend our empathy to not just the users, but to the business owners. Yeah, we also need to listen to them in return to say, okay, tell us now, what are your goals and what are your pain points and what your priorities are. And then with that sort of open conversations to really see how can we balance it all? How can we make sure that the key pain points of your customers and users are being solved? At the same time, that's helping you to drive your business strategies or meet your business goals. In terms of, like, for example, if it's a budget constraint, for example, then obviously we want to be proposing solutions that are practical for them to adopt as well. So it's about, can we also make some compromise and say, okay, if this is the ideal case, but for some reason that's not possible, it's not 1 or 0, right? But the beauty of design is, okay, what can we do? What can we change to make sure that it's not completely something that the users cannot enjoy, but at the same time, it's still something the business can manage. Yeah.
Well said. Well said. My next question to you, Wendy, is that how do you, as the designer, keep up with the latest design trends and technology advancements? I mean, it seems to be changing every day.
I know. I laugh because I'm barely able to keep up.
Okay.
You're so right. Things are changing so fast.
Correct.
There is always so much to learn and so little time, right?
Correct.
I mean, if you really think about it, it's just been a while back, when everyone was talking about Web 3.0 and Metaverse, and we were barely able to wrap our heads around them, right? And then fast forward to today, look at how the narrative has changed.
Correct.
We're suddenly all talking about ChatGPT, right?
ChatGPT 4.0.
Exactly. I mean, this artificial intelligence chatbot, and it was just only launched in what?
November
late last year?
Yeah.
November last year.
Yeah.
It's really difficult. I would say I would like to hear how you keep up with the trends as well. But I think what helps me is that I like to read. So I think that's an advantage, right, that I have. So I make sure that I'm part of active communities who care about design and technologies as well. So through these communities, they would send you newsletters, they would push out events, and so just me glancing at those key topics covered by their newsletters or their events, it will already give me a quick sense of, like, okay, where things are going, right? And then I kind of also subscribe to Google Alerts, which does the same thing. They just capture basically what the latest news are, and I kind of try to see if there are patterns emerging. So when there is a pattern emerging, I will then only pick 1 or 2 news articles to read, because that's probably the most amount of time I can spend,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah, so that's been helpful. That's been
Said.
helpful.
Well said.
Yeah.
The next question that I have for you, Wendy, is that, when I've spoken to many designers, and one of the challenges for every designer is how do you make your designs accessible for everybody? I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Accessible design. This topic is something that more and more people are paying attention to.
Okay.
And that's exciting because it is actually close to the heart of human-centered design, right? Making sure that people with all kinds of abilities are included in your design. That's what accessible design and inclusive design is all about.
Correct.
And that's what human-centered design is about. It's just really, again, bringing back the human, right, into the center of the conversation. And what is also exciting about accessible design is that it doesn't just benefit the users themselves, but it benefits the business as well. So I think this is something that more businesses need to kind of like think about. So how do we ensure that in the work that we do, we really keep them in mind, right? I would say number one is just being mindful, first of all, because I think sometimes it's not like we as designers intentionally leave them out. It's just that we are so used to doing certain things in a certain way that it takes a lot more effort to kind of like be conscious and be more aware and recognize that hey, we are actually leaving people out of this.
Correct.
Every decision that we make that includes a certain profile of people is actually us excluding other profiles. Right. So just being aware of that first, I think is important. All right. Because when we say, okay, we're going to include this profile of users, other profiles are being excluded. And that happens when we have our own biases. So just being aware, and then that awareness needs to lead to an action. So then we need to intentionally seek out, okay, what are the opportunities where we can be a lot more inclusive than not? All right. Because when it comes to web design, for example, there are a lot of resources online that you can use as a checklist or a guideline where it already tells you that, okay, for your website to be more accessible, you need to make sure that the contrast is there, the use of fonts is like this and that, right? So that's not difficult to do, but it's really, you realize that the resource and the tools are there, but it's us as the humans making that intentional decision to say, yes, I'm going to integrate all this.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. My next question to you is, let's talk a little bit about 55 minutes now. Tell me a little bit about the kind of team culture you have at 55 minutes, because they're all a bunch of young developers. So what is the kind of culture that you are building in your organization?
Right. So I'm very big on collaboration. So the team, we're a very collaborative team. We don't work in silos. We really believe that not any single one of us would have all the answers at any point of time. So the value of being collaborative is that it really makes us better problem solvers. It just really listening to someone else's perspective and getting someone else in the team to say, can you give me a feedback on that, or what do you think of this? And I think even in terms of creative work, having a lot more, of our heads coming together, sharing that same goals, right? To say that, yeah, we want to make this better. And so more heads coming together and brainstorming and ideating really gives us a lot more of that options to say, oh, I haven't thought of this. Oh yeah, this is interesting. Let's look more into that. Or, when I mentioned just now about our own biases, right? Just being collaborative also makes sure that we don't just carry our own biases
Mm.
throughout the whole design journey. We're like, hey, I didn't think of that. Can you tell me more? What makes you say that? And just being open to different people's perspective and ideas. That is important. So that's the culture that I have always wanted to build in 55 minutes.
Mm.
And at the same time, really being empathetic as as people.
Mm.
Empathy is the key element in human-centered design,
Mm.
in user experience design. So of course, as an organization, we want to make sure that we're leaving that out, right? But at the
Yeah.
same time, as um as an organization, I think the way that I want to make decisions and the way I want to engage the team and the way they interact with each other,
Mm.
I think it's also equally important that we apply empathy to each other. So I would say, yeah, these two keywords is the basis
Interesting.
of the culture that I'm hoping to build.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Great response. Thank you. So time for two more questions for you, Wendy. And I'd like to
Mm.
now move to uncommon.
Ah.
When I was reading about you, I was so fascinated with the names, 55 minutes, uncommon. Uh, Tell me about the uncommon community and how is it helping women to network better?
Mm. I have to agree with you that I love the name. It was
Um,
what caught my attention,
correct.
when I first heard about this platform for female leaders. And I love it because, I think that spirit behind um us as leaders is really about how can we make sure that we don't settle
Mm.
for the same old thing and just status
Correct.
quo. Leadership does require us
Mhm.
to get out of our comfort zones and, like I said, stand firm for something, even if it's not common yet. It could be something very different and unpopular, but if you believe that it matters, then you have to be there, right? And so I love that the entire concept of uncommon.
Mm.
So as a platform, it's a leadership kind of network for
Mhm.
female leaders in Asia.
Mhm.
And so their interest is to empower us as women to become better leaders who support each other
Mm.
while we are focusing on creating impact and positive change.
Mm.
So as part of this network, right? The platform offers talks and workshops led by experts. And then we have and these workshops and talks are both in person as well as online.
Right.
And then they have resources, networking opportunities, for us to meet in person through dinners, drinks, and they even have this very interesting thing called coffee roulette,
Mhm.
where you are randomly matched with someone from the platform and you're supposed to arrange to have coffee with the person yourself and you go have conversations with
Mm.
each other. And I thought that was
That's
really
fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, I mean it's fun, right? You know what you're gonna get, but you know that there is intention to network with someone else
Mm.
who cares about um leadership, who cares about supporting other women.
Well said.
So that's the beauty of this
Mm.
platform.
Mm.
Um, Personally, I think what has impacted me the most though is that this platform allows me to be in a small group. We call it like a core group where we have regular meetups with each
Mm.
other, and
Mm.
and there'll be a coach attached to the group, and the coach will facilitate regular mentoring sessions, and
Mm.
that's something that I always look forward to.
Mm. Fascinating. And my last question for you, Wendy, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own amazing journey as an entrepreneur, as a designer, as a human-centric designer, what would you say are three lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away from your own journey and from our conversation?
3 lessons. I suppose that I can think about, our conversation so far. From what I've been sharing, I think one thing that really stands out is that human-centered design. I want to say that human-centered design is not just meant for designers. User experience design is not just about the users, so as much as the name says it, human-centered design is not just for designers. User experience design, user is not just about the users. These are frameworks that everyone can use to problem solve, and these frameworks, I think the beauty of them is they invite all the important stakeholders at the discussion table, right? And it kind of tells you like what really matters is the people.
Correct.
Right? And it's about starting from understanding the people. So that's number one. So the understanding is very important, and that probably leads me to lesson number two. Lesson number two, I would say, is then about empathy. Right? Why do we need to understand people? It's because it allows us to gain empathy for the people in the problem. So empathy is key to me. I would say empathy is key to enabling ourselves and others around us to thrive. That's why empathy is important. That's why we want to understand people. It's about enabling ourselves and others to thrive. And I would think of the third one. This is very personal to me because, and I've shared this before in another interview. I would say never say never. Change is a constant. Change is a constant. I think it's so important to keep an open mind because that increases our adaptability and our effectiveness as leaders.
Wonderful.
Let me share with you a quick story. A few years ago, before COVID became a thing, if someone asked me, would you and your team work remotely? I would say no without batting an eyelid. I'll say no way, But fast forward to today, my team at 55 Minutes, we've been working remotely ever since 2020. And we're still working remotely today. Of course, with every arrangement, there would be pros and cons. You are sacrificing something, but at the same time, you have benefits as well. But you ask me now today, would you think remote work is possible and feasible? The answer is yes.
Absolutely.
So never say never.
Absolutely. Wonderful. And on that note, Wendy, and your amazing lessons, about human-centered design, you're so right. The two words human-centered can apply to every aspect of our life, not just design, relationships and everything else. Second, you spoke about empathy and how critical it is for the problem and how important it is to be able to strive. And the third one, which I really love, was never say never, because you're so right. Change is the only constant we have in our lives. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your journey. Thank you for speaking to me about what are the background of the word of your 55 minutes. Thank you for speaking to me about user experience, about inclusiveness in design, and about culture. Thank you again, and good luck.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called you.